Chapter 25. Drowning. Caitlin followed the mastiff bitch on a downslope through the woods. Every now and then, the big dog would turn her head back to make sure her newfound mistress was coming. The dog led her down into a gentle hollow, which the rain had turned into a tiny creek. The mastiff lowered her head and slurped from the trickle, greedy. Caitlin caught up to her. She set the shotgun beside her and took a few handfuls of cold water for herself. Caitlin leaned her body against the dog's warmth and absently stroked her back while the dog satisfied her thirst. She looked over at Caitlin and wagged her tail. Then her ears pricked up and she froze. Caitlin felt the hackles under her fingers bristle and the vibration of a quiet growl in the beast's chest. "What is it, girl?" Then the dog was finished drinking. She shook off Caitlin's hand and jogged downstream, her pace quickening as she followed the flow of water. As the dog disappeared from view, loping around a bend, Caitlin picked up the shotgun and started after. "Hey, girl, wait!" Fear began to take hold. As she neared the turn herself, there was a deep bark, followed by splashing. Caitlin ran toward the sound. She rounded the bend and stopped. 10 corpses were waiting for her, half in and half out of a little pool. The mastiff was sniffing toward the dead, mouth pulled up at the sides, revealing sharp white teeth. The dull rumble of a warning growl spoke of coming death for her enemies. Caitlin moved forward slowly, shotgun up. The bodies lay still, but terror moved inside her, constricting her breath. The dog began barking again, loud, insistent. She shot a look back at Caitlin, then did a sideways jump hop, splashing in the stream and looking back toward the little pond. Caitlin saw that some sort of makeshift dam had caused the pool. A large log lay across the stream's passageway, with piles of medium-sized stones shoved against it to catch the water's flow. Something odd was poking up just at the dam's center. The mastiff barked again. She looked back to Caitlin with urgency. Caitlin approached, shotgun leveled. The odd thing poking out of the water was a nose and the mustache beneath it. Caitlin inhaled sharply. She knew the submerged man. His eyes opened and stared up, trying to make her out through the water. He breathed in carefully through his nose. A flow of bubbles burbled up out of him. Caitlin's own breath caught as her mind stitched together the horror of the entire picture. Sergeant Renoir was buried under 100 pounds of wood and stones. Sergeant Renoir was very slowly drowning. When Renoir heard the barking, he opened his eyes. He breathed in carefully through his nose. He knew that the end was close. Water was now coming in with the air. Soon his nose would submerge and he could stop fighting and embrace death. He felt at peace with that fact. But Leonie and his girls and all of his sins that followed, he had earned this ending. Then, through the film of water, he saw Leonie standing over him. He blinked, and the hair flashed from Leonie's bouncing blonde curls to Caitlin's ginger. He could see a big, dark mass splashing the pool in his peripheral vision. The dog barked again, and the sound rumbled to him, muffled by the water. Caitlin tossed the shotgun and the shell pouch onto the stream bank. She knelt in the shallow pool and began grabbing rocks out of the dam and tossing them aside. They were not too large, but they were formidable enough, and her hands were raw within 5 minutes. The mastiff stood and watched for a bit. She even splashed in the pool and dug with her paws at the dam, but all the big bitch succeeded in doing was turning the clear stream to mud. Caitlin could no longer make out Renoir's moustache below the nose. She shooed the dog out of the pool and pressed on. Chastised, the mastiff sat back and watched, bored now. She caught sight of a grey squirrel foraging for nuts. She barked once. When Caitlin took no notice, the mastiff stood and headed off into the woods after it. Some time after the dog had gone, Caitlin paused and caught her breath. She shivered, flexing her numb, bloody hands. She was briefly glad of the chill air. She could not feel the pain in her fingers caused by the myriad of little cuts inflicted by the bite of the sharp-edged granite stones. She looked at Renoir's nose, peeking up from the water, and gave up. A half hour of non-stop digging, and she had not turned the tide in any appreciable way. The water might be flowing better with the rocks gone, but the pool was still rising, a millimetre at a time. It was a true Sisyphean task. She could press on and push all these boulders up and away, but the water would not hold its advance. She might move every bloody stone in the entire world, and she would still never budge the tree trunk that lay across Renoir's chest. The demons wanted Renoir in hell. They had built a perfect vehicle to deliver him there. She had the loony thought that if only she had never come across Renoir in the stream, she would not be stuck knowing that it was happening, and would not inherit an aftermath she could clearly see coming. It echoed thoughts she had often had while in the operating theatre of men wounded past repair. If she had never known they existed, she would not have had to mourn their passing. But here she was, God damn it, cemented firmly to this responsibility. She was stuck with the truth of this moment now, receiving her own little bit of hell from the demons who had done in Renoir. A burst of anger fueled her. She dug down in the muck, pulled out another stone, and cast it aside, then another and another. She contented herself that she only had to continue this until Renoir drowned. After he passed, she could walk away. She would still be stuck with the memory, proof of her impotence against the tidal wave of vengeance sweeping the earth, the only balm for it, that she'd done what she could with what she had. She dug with rage now, ferocious, which is why she did not hear them coming. Isaiah kept a steady pace through the scrub brush and pines for most of the morning. It kept his blood flowing, which was the only thing keeping him warm. He headed east toward the sun, figuring that the fortifications old Wolfgang had been bragging about were out there somewhere, and if he kept on in that direction, he would reach some sort of place or another he could shack up in securely before nightfall. He finally stepped out of the trees onto a road that ran east and west. He was glad of it. The sun was not cutting through the cold very much, but it was better than the dark shade of the woods, and he started making real time, eastbound on the cambered path. When he came to the apex of a long curve in the road, he stopped in his tracks. He recognized the gait of the man ahead of him the second he saw him, striding along, Portuguese cutlass hanging from his left hip. Holy shit, he laughed. If it ain't my fucking deputy. Francois pivoted back at the sound. When he saw Isaiah, he nearly burst into tears of joy. Isaiah broke into a trot, a shot of unexpected elation launching him. The two men met and embraced. Holy shit, Isaiah repeated. Holy shit. Isaiah, I cannot believe you are alive. You best believe it. If I was dead, pretty sure I'd be laid up somewheres having my day nap. Get myself all warmed up to hunt down your African ass come the sunset. Francois smiled grimly at Jose's gallows humor. How did you escape? I didn't. Didn't luck into any fucking lions this time, neither. Them motherfuckers grabbed me up good, strung me up from the rafters, had a good old time with me, and then went the fuck to sleep. Think I taught them a little lesson about going to sleep on me, though. Love to see their faces when they wake up tonight and try to go strolling. Them legs of theirs ain't gonna work too well. What did you do? Isaiah laughed. Hobbled those motherfuckers. And how? 16-pound fence maul to do that. Isaiah paused. The brutality had been equal parts awful and satisfying. He shook it off and hollered to the world. Good luck trying to arrest me tonight, you miserable sons of bitches. As Francois patted his shoulder. I'm glad. Yeah, me too. Where you walking? East. We have been west, oui? I do not know where Lieutenant Durance Verdun lies, but perhaps the Boche fort. Great minds thinking alike, Deputy. Let's find us some shelter and something worth eating. I'm near done in on that front alone. Francois patted Jose's shoulder again, assured that his friend was not a fever dream. Oui, let us do so. They turned back east and found the beast standing in the road before them. Francois's cutlass flew free of its scabbard, and Jose's pilfered bayonet was quick to his hand. But as it advanced on them, they backed away. Oh, shit, said Jose. Having survived all he had faced so far, this was definitely not how he planned to die. Then the big brindle dog began to wag her tail and bark. Caitlin looked up, soaked in the cold stream water and mud. She stumbled back, shocked. The mastiff had her thick forepaws resting on the log that held Renoir submerged. Her tail swung back and forth with pride. Behind her stood Francois and Isaiah. Caitlin took in the sight of her friends and gasped. Help was the only word that she could find. Francois and Isaiah could see a pair of muddy legs sticking out from beneath the felled tree. It's Sergeant Renoir, she cried out. Francois and Isaiah climbed over and dropped into the pool of water. Francois looked at Isaiah. Help me get this tree off of him. He grabbed one side of the log, and Isaiah grabbed the other. They heaved up. The fallen tree did not move an inch. Shit, gotta get a lever under this thing. Ain't no way we move it on our own, said Francois. Yes, said Francois. I'll find something to lever it with. Isaiah nodded toward the corpses. Get them bodies out of there. Get that water level down. Francois grabbed the nearest dead man and dragged him out, dropping the sodden body into the mud. Isaiah looked at Caitlin. Miss Caitlin, keep pulling them rocks out. I'll be back in a hurry. Isaiah climbed out of the muddy water and jogged into the trees. Francois dragged another soaked dead man out. He saw Renoir's face beneath the water. His neck was painfully arched to keep his nostrils just above the surface. It spurred Francois. He grabbed a third body under the armpits and dragged it up and out. This was a losing proposition, that was certain, but it was one Francois would not give up without a fight. Renoir could see that others had come. He heard the vibrations of Isaiah's and Francois's voices in his waterlogged ears and saw them moving beyond the water's blur. All he wanted now was to die. He was filled with the shame of Leonie's story. Death might erase all the events he had witnessed, might void him of his responsibility. He saw Isaiah disappear from view. He heard Francois pulling bodies away. It broke his heart that they were doing this for him. Renoir gave in. He let his head sink to the bottom. No! Caitlin called out. As she watched Renoir's nose disappear underwater, Francois turned at her cry and dropped the dead man he'd been hauling. He jumped through the water to Renoir's side and got his hands under his head, pulling him back up, but Renoir fought against him. His last breath of air came bubbling back out of his lungs, and he struggled hard to keep his nose under water, but Francois was too strong. He cradled his friend's head up, took a breath of air, and brought his lips to Renoir's. Their mouths met, and Francois blew out, forcing the air into Renoir's mouth, filling his lungs with air. Renoir's eyes shot open and met Francois's. "I will breathe for you, Sergeant. I will breathe for you," Francois said. Renoir heard the words vibrate through the water and reach his ears. Francois took another deep breath and brought it to Renoir's mouth. This time, Renoir allowed it. He took in the breath and nodded his head. Francois looked to the woods where Isaiah had disappeared. "Hurry, Isaiah! Hurry!" Isaiah heard Francois call out to him. "God damn, deputy, I'm hurrying fast as I fucking can." He saw it. A lightning-felled ash tree. Good hardwood. Here's hoping anyway. Isaiah grabbed a long, thick limb that had barely survived the lightning strike and pulled down hard. It did not budge. God damn! He wrapped both arms around it and put his weight into it, then started a rhythmic bouncing. The limb made one sharp popping sound as a splinter of the pith cracked. Isaiah threw both of his arms over the top of it and jumped, letting all his weight and momentum come down on the limb. With a huge crack, the thing split and dropped with him to the wet ground. "That's right, you son of a bitch!" Isaiah stood and dried off his hands. He grabbed the limb and shoved it to the side, breaking the last of the bark and fibers. Then he twisted until the whole thing wrenched free. He grabbed his prize and dragged it through the woods on the run, rushing it back toward Renoir's dying place.